Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Advanced Plant Maintenance webinar. Mike Stitt will be our presenter today. Many of you know Mike. He is one of our most experienced SyteLine experts here. So I'm really pleased to have him available for you today to present Advanced Plant Maintenance. Mike?
Okay, Wendy, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me well and see my screen. I'm using a Word document right now just to show you an agenda for what we're going to cover. I think this will be about 45 minutes in length, and we can take questions, but we should be able to get through the material quickly, but still comprehensively. All right, so we'll start off with some concepts that we'll address. Then we'll get into the details, and those details are things like this, setting up assets, and we'll talk about asset configuration. But assets are nothing more than the plant equipment that you want to subject to maintenance activities. And maintenance is, you can think of as sort of preventive maintenance, and then sort of as needed break and fix type of maintenance. But those are, you conduct or you set up maintenance work orders against assets. And you'll hear the term unit. That's what we call an asset in the system. And then we'll talk about how to set up maintenance schedules, PM schedules, how to make ad hoc maintenance requests, and then the processing of these maintenance work orders. They're actually called service orders. We'll show you that process. Then we'll show some of the scheduling capabilities of the system. And then finally, reporting activity. How do you record what took place on a maintenance work order? All right, so that's the Word document. Let's go ahead and jump in or into the software. And I am demonstrating using version 901 of the software. I imagine most of you folks think of the software as by the name of SyteLine. It's been rebranded to be called CloudSuite Industrial. I might use both those terms today, but anyways, we're in version 901, a relatively new version, but many of you know that's version 10 is about to come out. So anyways, this is 901. And this is what we call positioning form related to the plant maintenance, advanced plant maintenance module. And you look at this screen here, this is kind of a summary screen. It sort of addresses the major functional areas of the system. And if you look on this sort of column here, it's all about setting up the assets that the plant maintenance system will use. So we'll dig into that. Notice again, there is this notion of asset or configuration. What that means, as you set up a particular piece of equipment that's subject to maintenance activity, you can also indicate its configuration, which is really a sort of a material listing of all the components of that asset. And that's helpful for many reasons. We'll delve into some of those. Some of these things don't apply as much, I won't address, but certainly when you're looking at an asset, it can be subject to a PM schedule. All right, so that's column 1 here. Column 2 has to do with the idea of when there is a breakdown and a repair is needed, there is a capability to make a maintenance request. So if you have people on the plant floor, supervisors, others that want to make a request, that request can be made through the system, and then that request can be converted after possible review. It can be converted to a maintenance work order. That's what this column has to do with. The last column is really how you process maintenance, or again, what are called service orders. And we'll walk into all the details of that. When you look at this column, certainly there's the notion of the service order itself, tracking activity, if you want to track things like material costs and labor costs, or if there's any expenses. But although maybe what I should say there is maybe if you have outside parties, third party doing maintenance work, a contractor, there's linkages and processes to handle that as well. And then certainly down here, there's a scheduling capability. Now, some of you people may know this, that there is this module that you're seeing today is an add-on module to SyteLine. It is it's a derivative of the service module. some of you may know it as FS Plus. When I say it's a derivative of it, there's the service module, where FS Plus has a whole host of functionality, and the plant maintenance module sort of takes advantage of much of that functionality to nicely address maintenance issues. One of the reasons I mention that to you is A, for just general reasons, but B, you will see the word service sometimes throughout, because again, some of this functionality was originally created for a company that does sort of post-sales service work, where maybe you might have to dispatch a technician to the field to do repair or warranty work. So you'll see this word service throughout. Okay, so this is just again a high level, what we call positioning form. Now let's go ahead and start jumping into the details. So remember, we said we'd start by talking about assets. I have, by the way, my screens pre-opened. I'm sure most of you folks know how to navigate throughout the system, so we won't get into that. But I have most of my screens preloaded, or I'll launch them through buttons and right-click processes. But what we're looking at right now is the units screen. And units is synonymous with maintenance equipment that you want to subject to maintenance processes. And by the way, with the linkage to the service module, a unit is also sort of, or can be, a serial number in SyteLine. But for the purposes of what we're doing today, a unit is a record in the system that represents a particular piece of equipment. So I have a series of unit records here. Again, you could think of this as the asset master if you wanted to. And when I look at things, there is the unit number. Here's a description. There's an ability, actually a requirement, to link it to a SyteLine item record. We'll talk about that a little bit. That sets some defaults for the unit record. But again, there's the unique identifier for this unit, aka asset. Here's its description. And there is a notion it could be tied to a customer, but in this case, I just have it tied to a sort of what you might think was the internal customer. That's another reason that's there, again, is the linkage, or the sort of the legacy of this coming from the service module, where you might be doing service for a specific customer. But in this case, there is your asset number. Now, when I look at this, there's a series of pretty important tabs on this screen. And this is a great screen. It's sort of a master screen. It sort of ties a lot of things together for a piece of equipment. If I start by looking at the maintenance tab, this is where I can indicate my periods or frequency of PM work. So if you look at this little grid down here, in this particular case, it says I'm going to do PM work every 90 days. And this is sort of based on a time frequency. You can also initiate PM based on sort of activity, maybe hits on a piece of equipment, or volumes of something flowing through a blending unit, things of that nature. In my example here, again, I have it based on PM being established on some sort of time basis. And those time bases can be things like days, weeks, months, or, like I said, a meter reading. Now, there's that. Now, that's an example of a maintenance asset that only has one PM schedule set up for it. But if I click down here to the fifth record, you'll see a case where, let me expand this grid column a little bit, where this one it's subject to a full PM every 6 months and a quarterly PM every 3 months. So the idea we're getting at there is there's ways to set up maintenance schedules for an asset, and also to set up multiple maintenance schedules for an asset. Now, once these are established, the system has tools. It has a specific utility that's available to initiate, sort of automate the creation of the maintenance or PM work order. We'll show you that in a minute. In fact, I'll jump to that right now. This is something called the Service Order Automatic Generation Utility. And this is a utility that interprets the last time an asset had PM against it, and based on that, it can review, assess that and determine whether or not a new PM work order is needed, and if so, it can automatically create that. So this is a process that can be run manually, or as some of you guys know, there's a capability in SyteLine, CloudSuite Industrial, to set tasks on what's called a background queue, and it's common to set this background queue to run once a day or maybe once a week, but commonly once a day, maybe in a quiet time. And when this runs, the system will then create the necessary PM work orders. So it's a nice tool to sort of automate PM schedule creation, PM work order creation. And by the way, once this happens, we have some companies doing things like this, is then sending an email to the maintenance manager, says here's the PMs that have been set up. Maybe that at that point he wants to assign them to particular maintenance technicians. But that's a nice tool, a nice utility to sort of build or create the maintenance PM work order automatically. So I'll close that out. Now I'm going to come back to this unit screen again. So this is our way of defining when PM work will take place. Now, when I look at the unit records on other fronts, I can see things like, what's my service history? Okay, and I'll go back to my first asset, or my first unit up here. Here's a case where you can kind of see this is all the maintenance work orders, aka service orders, that have taken place through time. And through, like much of SyteLine, when you have data here, then you're able to easily sort of do right clicks and drill into the details. But it's a nice view of all the maintenance work orders that took place. And you can kind of see there, in my case, you can see a couple of them are the records 1 and 3 are repair oriented, sort of break and fix maintenance activity. And the second one is a PM type, preventive maintenance work order. So again, once you get to the point where a maintenance work order, aka service order, is created, that service order could either be for PM work or ad hoc break and fix type of work. But this is a nice view of seeing the sort of the history of every time you had to process a work order. All right, now I'm going to move to this tab called Tickets. And for you experienced SyteLine people, what I did is I changed the string here. That tab is typically called Incidents, but I changed the tab. I forgot to change it back, but it's a ticket or an incident is a way for someone to indicate, I may have a maintenance requirement. So you can create either, what I'm calling a ticket now, or a maintenance request through what's really called an incident. But that's the requesting mechanism to create, again, a ticket or an incident. Well, I'll walk you through that a little bit. Now, the last thing I'll show you on this screen is, as I look at this particular asset unit, I have this button over here that says Unit Configuration. And when I click that, what we're seeing here for this particular piece of equipment is all the parts, all the components, if you will, that go into that particular piece of equipment. And I had some fun putting this together, gonculator, rigamidanus, etc. But again, this is the idea of here's all the components of that particular piece of equipment. So it's nice for you to establish that, and each of these can be subject to PM schedules as well if that's necessary. But what's also nice about this is as you conduct PM work and maybe new parts are needed, or you have to swap out parts and you want kind of a life cycle view of what happened to this particular piece of equipment, the system gives you this through this sort of the as of date. And if you look down here, when I expand the first component on here, I'll see that I needed some chromium steel, and this was actually added to this unit on 9/14. Today, I did this morning before the demonstration, and it was done so on this particular repair work order. So what's kind of clever about that is you're getting, again, a nice life cycle view of what was on this piece of equipment and its sort of time phase. So if I did this kind of thing, I said, show me what this piece of equipment looked like as of 9/10, and I refresh that, you'll see that there's no, that subcomponent to my gonculator didn't exist. So it's a nice, again, really nice tool to allow you to see a life cycle view of the parts that are being used, that are part of that particular piece of equipment. Okay, now that gives you a pretty good idea of what a unit, aka asset, is. And we'll move on from that. A couple of things I did forget to mention to you, though, is that if I go to this maintenance tab, you will see that there is a linkage to an asset number. I've been using the term asset somewhat, somewhat during this presentation. This is a drop down and a linkage to the SyteLine fixed asset system. So it's not uncommon for our customers that if they're using the fixed asset system, they have assets set up over there, and they use the same asset number here as they're setting up the assets, aka units, that are used in the plant maintenance module. So there's a linkage there. There's also this notion that there's a linkage to the resource, and that goes to the SyteLine planning and scheduling capabilities. Because the idea there is if you're using the SyteLine scheduling system, if an asset or a unit is planned for maintenance, it may be down and unavailable for a period of time. So there's some light functionality that allows you to say, hey, this particular piece of equipment is on maintenance right now, so it's made unavailable from a capacity standpoint for the scheduling system. So there's some things to be aware of there as well. Okay, now let's talk about maintenance requests. What we just sort of wrapped up there is that's the essence of the asset or the unit master. Now let's look at the idea of creating a maintenance request. If I remember, that's what's called an incident or a ticket. Now I can do things like this. Quickly click on this button and look at the different tickets or incidents in the system. If I look at this one, it's someone saying there's an intermittent malfunction to this particular piece of equipment. Okay, and it's a way to someone came in here and created a new ticket record, and once that was created, that maybe went on the sort of a queue for a maintenance manager, maintenance supervisor, and that maintenance supervisor can do things like evaluate this and then do things like convert. If I say what I'm doing here is if I click this destination button, and it has already occurred in this case, but you hit this destination button, you will take a ticket and convert it to a service order, aka maintenance work order. So the whole key to this is, again, it's a way to allow people to submit a request. That request gets evaluated, and then it can get converted to a maintenance work order. Now, when there's a request like this, again, the main things you're doing there are indicating what piece of equipment is in play, maybe what's the nature of the problem. Notice if I go to the Notes tab, I have the ability to put in many notes. In fact, if you look at my second example here, here's a case where there's more than one note that was made. It's a nice little tool there that you can kind of see all of the notes that related to this particular ticket or incident. But again, it's the tool that allows a maintenance or someone to identify the potential need for maintenance activity. So that's called an incident or a ticket. Now, there is a tool in our system called it's a console that can be used to allow maintenance supervisors to see all the maintenance requests, and from this they can do things like convert these tickets or incidents into maintenance work orders. So it's a console, again, of listing everything that's sort of pending. And in my case, there's a couple pending tasks, and then I can easily switch those over into maintenance work orders if I wanted to. Okay, now, so that's the ticketing approach. I'll show you this real fast. If I wanted to create sort of a maintenance request, I could do this kind of thing. There's a button here that says ticket create. That's actually incident create. And when I do that, it's kind of a wizard here to say, I want to create a maintenance request. I can type in some notes here, and maybe I put in a reason for it, and then I hit the OK button, and that creates a maintenance request, aka ticket or incident. And it's not uncommon in our customer base, I think, for after this is created, maybe if you're using our workflow system, our application event system, that maybe this creates an email or an alert over to maybe the maintenance supervisor. But the point is, there's a nice tool here to get these requests created. I'll actually cancel out of that. Okay, now here's where we are now. We talked about the sort of the unit or asset master. We talked about maintenance schedules. Then we talked about how to make maintenance requests. And maybe I wasn't clear enough about that, but those maintenance requests are obviously for these sort of break and fix scenarios, the sort of ad hoc requirements. Whereas the maintenance, the PM schedule is there for to build PM work orders. Now, let's talk about the actual maintenance work orders themselves and some of the relevant things that go in to a maintenance work order. Again, I'm going to start using the term service order because that's what we call them. Now, there is a good piece of functionality, and I'm going to address this briefly, something called service order templates. You can create as many service order templates as you'd like, or as few as you'd like, but typically the process of creating a service order, a maintenance service order, oftentimes uses a template because the template can predefine the type of work that needs to take place. So if you're doing PM work, you know, we always use the example, if you're doing an oil change, certainly you want to indicate the sort of the tasks you're going to go through and the materials, aka oils or air filters, et cetera, that are needed. And the service order template is an excellent tool to do that. So for example, here I have a template just called PM. And when I set this up, I can do things like indicate, here's the steps that I want to go through during this PM process. All right. And if I went down into this transaction screen, I could also indicate what type of materials, items are needed as well. So a service order is really an excellent tool, or service order template is exactly that. It's a great template tool to allow you to predefine what is needed on any given PM activity, or even if you have some kind of if it's an ad hoc break and fix work order, you may still have sort of an infrastructure, sort of a setup, a pre-setup of tasks that you want to do. So it's a good way to predefine those things. And then when you actually create a maintenance work order, a service order, you indicate which PM or which template you're going to use, and the system then sort of sweeps these tasks and materials onto the service order. By the way, these operations and materials, if you guys are good grizzled SyteLine people, it's almost like a bill of material and routing, or a BOM, bill of manufacturing in SyteLine. Again, these are sort of like routing operations. And then again, if I went to transactions, I could get down. In fact, let's do that. I'll hit the transactions button. And when I do that, there's this notion on material where I can, instead of actual material, if I hit the plan button, this is where I can predefine things like, in order to do a PM on a, let's say there's some kind of oil change is needed. Here I need oil and a filter, and any other materials I might need. But you notice there, those are what are called planned materials, and they are part of that particular template. So again, the idea is when the maintenance work order gets created, the template serves up all the sort of the requirements of that particular task. Pretty good stuff. If you give some sort of careful consideration to how you set up these templates, it can make the process of defining and administering the work orders, the service orders, pretty efficient. Okay, now I'll close out of that, and let's go back and let's look at a service order, a maintenance work order a little bit. So I'll come back here to my unit screen, and from here, I can kind of quickly go over and say, you know what, I'm going to look at this particular, I'm just going to drill into the history of this. So I'll look at the details of that service order. So when I do that little right-click process, you can kind of see here that there's the service order number. It's equipment malfunction. Okay, it came from a ticket, so there was a request process. It doesn't have to, but this was a case where the ticket resulted because someone evaluated the request and then sort of rolled it over to a service order. And then the service order is indicating there's the piece of equipment, there's its item number and description, and then this might be the lists of tasks that are involved. In my case, there's only one task here, but this is where you could say, instead of just servicing the unit, I'm gonna spell out the various steps I'm gonna go through. Because one of the reasons you want to do that is A, you're trying to define some instructions for the process, but you can also report activity at the operation level. So this is a typical service order. There's what's being serviced. If I go to the main tab, you can see like who is the partner that's been assigned to that. We'll talk about a partner in a minute, but briefly right now, a partner is someone that does maintenance work. It's typically a maintenance technician. The reason the term partner is used is that it might be an internal employee or it could be a contractor. So those are, you'll see we're going to go to the partner setup form here in a few minutes, but this is kind of the lead partner that's assigned to this particular maintenance work order. And that doesn't mean you can't assign others, but Charles Benson is the lead, or maybe the primary or the only maintenance technician that's assigned here. Notice we'll get into this. If I go to the scheduling tab, you can kind of see what date it was scheduled for, et cetera. This is a closed service order, but these are the kinds of things that are associated with a service order. If I come to the a tab that says billing, again, keep in mind this was built to parts of this were built for a service organization that might do in field repair work. So you're not going to be billing yourselves internally for this, but on this tab, you also can see things like on this particular repair maintenance work order, what kind of costs did we accumulate? How much material cost, how much labor cost, any kind of miscellaneous costs. So you get a kind of a nice idea of cost. So through time, you can get a good sort of sense of the cost to maintain equipment in your plant. So these are the typical things that you would address on a maintenance work order. If I look at all these buttons over here, certainly there is this is the work order report. So if you want a printed, almost like a job traveler kind of thing, if you want a work order traveler for your maintenance work order, that's available through this button. And there's other things you can do over here, but this is the essence of the maintenance work order screen. Okay, good. Now, from this work order, let's now talk a little bit about how you might schedule it and some of the activity that might take place against the work order. So I'm going to go over to a screen called Partners now. And on the Partners screen, this is what we alluded to just moments ago. Partners are maintenance technicians. And again, if you look here, a partner could be an employee, and that's what he is in my scenario, but it could be a vendor. And in some obscure situations, it could be a customer as well. But typically for most maintenance situations, you're either talking about an employee or a vendor. Again, because the vendor is someone that you might be contracting to do maintenance work for you. All right. But if you notice in this case, I have a partner set up. He happens to be an employee. There's his name. Here's his email, because the system has some nice auto email generation capabilities. Then you're also dealing with things like when he does work, what is his hourly cost? And then when you talk about things like scheduling, you can put down here what are his typical hours of operation. Not quite sure why this guy works 7 days a week, but those are his typical hours of operation. All right, the system system can use that because it has the ability to assign technicians to particular maintenance tasks. All right, and one of the ways it does that, and I don't think we have a whole lot of companies using it in this sophisticated of a way, but again, what you have the ability to say, what is his or her uptime hours, when are they available, and then you have things like saying what kind of certifications or maybe what skills do they have. Because when you set up skills, and I didn't get into this too much, but we were back on the unit screen, there's a place there to say what type of skills are needed to do maintenance work on a unit. And here's the place where you have the ability to say what kind of skills does this particular maintenance technician, aka partner, have. So when you sort of marry the skills of the partner with the skill requirements of the piece of equipment, the system can use that information to sort of assign work, smartly assign work to a partner based on the requirements. So without going into too much detail here, these are the kinds of things that are available if you want to schedule maintenance technicians. Some really nice things there. We could spend an hour on this topic by itself because there's lots of different scheduling options here. Now, I'll show you a couple of other things. I'll show you what's commonly used. Now that I have this partner screen set up, I'll close that. And I'll come over to here to one of the scheduling tools in the system, and this is called calendar scheduling. So it's essentially just a nice whiteboard, sort of like a Outlook calendar, if you will, that allows you to drop people or maintenance technicians and contractors onto different days, weeks, months, etc. I happen to be looking at a view here that's called it's partner day. So this is for this particular day, and here's my 5 partners in play. What do they have scheduled right now? Now, I could look at this in different ways if I wanted to. I could come over and say, no, I want to look at the partners week. And I don't have a lot of things scheduled here. I have some activity on Friday. Then you can see I don't really have any. There's something on Monday of next week, but that's looking at the data on a weekly perspective. I could have over here and said, I just want a sort of a general month view. So again, I don't have a whole lot scheduled on other days, but the point is there's different ways to look at this, okay? I will go back and look at the partner day, and we'll see it in that manner. Now, what's kind of some other nice things about this is you'll see color coding there. Right now, the color coding is based on sort of the type of work. So you might think of right now as I have 2 different colors here. One's sort of, if it's break and fix kind of work, sort of ad hoc maintenance, I have that colorized as blue. If it's PM work, I have it colorized, although I have some bad data here, but the green was supposed to indicate PM work. But again, it's a nice sort of general tool to allow you to look at a calendar, glean some information, and then maybe make some adjustments. And this is all drag and drop kind of scheduling. So if for some reason I wanted to move this task from David Daniels because maybe he called off, I can easily just drag it over, and I've just rescheduled that and put it on Charles Benson's to-do list. That's how easy it is. And again, I'll just drag it and move it back. So that's drag and drop scheduling a different task. If I wanted to, I could double click on this and I get the details of that task. So things like what unit is, or what piece of equipment is being used, if I want to add notes to it, etc. If I want to change dates. But the point is, this is the details of that task, and all I did to get to that was a simple double click. I could also, while I'm here, if I right click, I can do things like add. If I just indicated I put my 3 hours of time in, I could hit the add labor button. Or if I hit add material, that's where I'm recording what types of materials I used. Okay. If I need to send an email because maybe I can't completely resolve this breakdown problem, I have a quick way of clicking this and sending this an email maybe to my supervisor or maybe to the plant manager. So it's a great tool to allow you to sort of schedule the people and then allow them to sort of look at their schedule and make changes, see things, etc. That's what's called calendar scheduling. There is also another tool available for a maintenance technician called the Partner Console. And when you look at the Partner Console, this is more of a typical SyteLine screen where it's broken up into a sort of a main grid and some subgrids. But this is saying for this particular partner, here's all her open tasks, and it gives you details on those tasks and allows them to do things like clock on when they start activity and clock off when they finish activity. So some good things there as well. Now, if I were, let's look into some of the details of recording activity. So if I happen to be looking at a particular service order, remember, this is the essence of a service order screen, and you have this notion over here, if I hit this button that says SRO transactions, I click this button and notice there's these different tabs here. The fourth tab is not relevant to plant maintenance, but these other tabs are. So for example, this is the place where I could record material used on the work order initiative. I could also record my labor. When I record my labor, I have the ability to indicate things like what type of work I did, how many hours did I charge, things of that nature. If there were miscellaneous costs, maybe for some reason you had to buy, or you had to travel, you had to bring in someone. Those can be categorized as miscellaneous costs. If I go back to the material tab, I have the ability to do things like this to indicate that if I want to, from a material standpoint, I can, if there's a requirement to buy a part, I can link it to a purchase order or a PO requisition as a request. So our goal there is to tell you this module completely integrates with the balance of SyteLine, and it's just as you can tell from a look and feel standpoint, it's SyteLine or CloudSuite Industrial, if that's the term you use. But everything about it is fully integrated. So that there's a case where you can take a planned material requirement and link it to a PO or PO requisition. So this is a general purpose tool to record activity. Sometimes this particular screen is used by maybe in scenarios where the maintenance folks record activity manually on a piece of paper, and then this is submitted to the back office, and this is a screen that's used for data entry. Now, it doesn't have to be that way. This screen, certainly maintenance people can use this screen if they'd like, but it's sort of a typical input data entry kind of screen. One of the reasons I say that to you is, and this is another option that you need to be aware of, that's something called the service or plant maintenance homepage. Again, this is an optional module. I'm going to show it to you, yet another option that's available, but this is intended to be the kind of thing that allows maintenance people on their phone to see everything that's queued up for them. So notice what I did there. I don't have a phone emulator here, but imagine this is kind of the size of the screen, because it's used to be designed to be used on a mobile, a smartphone, and it supports iPhones and Android. But it's the kind of screen where there's a home page there, and from this I'm logged on as a particular maintenance technician now. So if I click my maintenance or my work queue, I get a nice view of all the work that's sort of queued up for me. And from there, I can do things like this. I can click on this, and now it's giving me a summary of that particular, this is packaging line 6 PM work. All right, if there was notes here, they would show up, etc. But this is a screen that's sort of queuing up the nature of the task. And then from this, there's a series of buttons up here. So like this one allows the technician to clock on and off. All right, so if I clicked on here, I've already been clocked on it, but that's what would allow the technician to clock on, and then when he or she's finished, it would allow him to clock off. These other buttons, I won't go through them all, but this one allows you to record material, allows the technician to record material on the particular work order. Okay. There's one in there. The next one is allow them to record labor. So the idea is this is a smartphone application that can be used by technicians to see sort of what's been queued up for them, and then to actually record activity. One thing I didn't show you here is there's also a calendar option. So when they click that, they can kind of see their calendar. Here's their calendar for Friday today, and they can look at it in different views as well. I can look at the whole week, etc. I don't have a lot of data there, but the point is there's a nice capability for them to see so the work that's sort of queued up for them as well. Okay, now I think those are the main topics we want to talk about. So let's do a little summary here. I'll go back to the Word document I had here. So again, we talked about concepts. Remember, this maintenance module is a derivative of the service module, but it works particularly nice. It handles a lot of the typical maintenance requirements that an organization has. We talked about the asset, sort of the master asset screen. Remember, that's called units, and the notion that you can indicate all the parts that are part of that piece of equipment. And we talked about how you can set up maintenance schedules for PM-related work. And then we talked about how you can make maintenance requests for ad hoc requirements, sort of breakdowns. Then we walked through the sort of the work order, what we call service order process. Remember, that's where I talked about this service order templates, a great tool to allow you to sort of predefine the type of work, the type of tasks that are needed in order to conduct maintenance effectively. Then we talked about some of the scheduling tools in the system, and then finally we finished with reporting activity. And in that case, think about what we showed you there. We showed you the typical screen called service order transactions, or SRO transactions, that can be used for sort of manual data entry. And then we also showed you the mobile option. Okay, very good. Wendy, I think that's the entirety of what I plan to present.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That's going to conclude our webinar for today.